The night Europe changed. The winter of 1946 settled heavily over Berlin, casting long shadows across a city that had become the centre of a reshaped Europe. Snow drifted quietly between the tall, rebuilt administrative buildings, their sharp geometric silhouettes illuminated by banners and flags that declared the triumph of a new order. Though the war had ended months earlier, the echoes of celebration still lingered in the air, not loud but persistent, like a memory refusing to fade. For many, the end of the conflict had brought a strange calm. For others, especially those whose lives had been overturned, it brought only uncertainty, and among them was Lukas Hartmann, a young historian who, before the war, had dreamed of becoming a university lecturer. Now, however, he found himself working in the Bureau for Cultural Development, an institution tasked with rewriting educational materials to suit the new political landscape. Every morning, Lukas walked across the same central square where massive parades had once taken place. But tonight, as he crossed it after work, the place felt different. The usual brightness seemed dimmer, the wind colder, and the silence deeper than usual. He pulled his scarf tighter around his neck and quickened his pace. He did not like being outside after dusk, not because he feared danger, but because the night time brought a heaviness that reminded him of things he tried not to think about. As he walked, he suddenly heard someone call his name. Lukas. He stopped and turned. A tall figure stepped out from the entrance of a nearby cafe. It was Anna Keller, a former university colleague, now a schoolteacher. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold and her dark hair was tucked neatly under a wool hat. "You walk like the whole city is chasing you," she said, smiling in that tired but warm way of hers. "Maybe I'm just trying to catch the last tram," Lukas answered, but the attempt at humour sounded hollow even to him. Anna tilted her head slightly. "You're worried again, aren't you?" Lukas hesitated. Then he finally said, "A new directive came to the Bureau today. We need to revise the entire history of the 1930s, not just a just rewrite from start to finish, and everything has to be approved by the ministry." Anna sighed. "You knew this was coming. They want a clean narrative." "I know," he replied quietly, "but a clean narrative is not the same as the truth." Anna looked around carefully, then lowered her voice. "Lukas, we've had this conversation before. You must be careful. Not everyone sees history the way we do." He nodded, though uneasily. The rules were clear. One could discuss art, architecture, even philosophy, but questioning the political narrative was dangerous. Not fatal, usually, but dangerous enough to end a career or bring unwanted attention. A sudden gust of wind made both of them shiver. "Come inside," Anna said, gesturing to the cafe. "It's warmer, and I have something to show you." Lukas hesitated, then followed her. The cafe was small and dimly lit, filled with the smell of roasted coffee beans. A soft radio melody played in the background, the same approved music that filled public spaces across the continent. They sat at a table in the corner, far from the other customers. Anna reached into her bag and took out a thin envelope. "What is that?" Lukas asked. "Something I found in the school archives," she whispered. "A letter, dated 1939. It records events that don't appear in our new curriculum." Lukas felt his breath catch. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you're one of the few people I trust," Anna replied, "and because I think you need to see what's being erased." She slid the envelope toward him. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed with age, handwritten in hurried strokes. The text described a town whose residents faced restrictions and forced relocations early into the war events, absent from every modern textbook. "This is only one example," Anna said. "There are hundreds of these documents. If we don't preserve them—" Lukas interrupted, his voice barely audible. "Anna, having this could get you in trouble." "I know," she answered calmly, "but someone has to remember. Someone has to keep the real story alive." Lukas closed his eyes for a moment. He felt a mix of fear and determination emotions he had suppressed for years. The Bureau reminded him constantly, "There is no old Europe, only the new one." But as he held the letter, he realized how fragile truth could be and how easily it could disappear. He looked up at Anna. "Why me? Why not someone braver?" She smiled softly. "Because you understand the weight of history, and because you still care, even when you pretend not to." Before Lukas could respond, the cafe door opened, letting in a blast of cold air and two uniformed officers. Anna stiffened. Lukas felt his heartbeat quicken. The officers glanced around the room, their expressions unreadable. Then they walked to the counter and began questioning the barista. Nothing unusual, routine patrols were common, but Lukas knew that even routine patrols could go wrong. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his coat, Anna exhaled slowly. "You should go," she whispered. "Read it when you're safe at home." Lukas nodded, stood up and headed for the door, forcing his steps to remain steady. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, muffling every sound. As he walked into the swirling white, one thought echoed in his mind. If this is the new Europe, what happened to the old one? And who decides which version survives? The letter in his pocket felt heavier with every step. It was the first piece of a truth long buried, and perhaps the beginning of something far more dangerous and far more important than he had ever imagined. Echoes beneath the archives. The next morning, Lukas woke earlier than usual. For a moment he lay still, listening to the low hum of the radiators and the distant rumble of trams outside his window. Berlin mornings were always grey, but today the light felt especially heavy, as if the sky itself carried secrets. He reached for his coat, pulled out the letter Anna had given him, and placed it on his desk. The handwriting was uneven and rushed. The ink faded, but still legible. It was a simple account, but the story it told was unmistakable. People forced from their homes, families separated, entire communities erased from the official record. Lukas rubbed his temples. How many more letters like this exist? And how many have already disappeared? He knew one thing. If he brought this letter to the bureau, it would be destroyed immediately. And if anyone discovered he had it, he didn't want to think too far ahead. At 7 o'clock he dressed, swallowed a quick breakfast, and walked through the cold streets toward the central archives, not the bureau, but the old university library annex, where he still had partial access from his days as a student. If there were more forgotten documents, that was the only place they could still survive. The air stung his cheeks as he crossed the river. A thin layer of snow rested on the bridges, muffling the footsteps of the few pedestrians. Berlin looked peaceful, almost too peaceful, as if silence had become a rule. When he arrived at the annex, the building's heavy wooden doors groaned open. The interior smelled of dust and ink, the unmistakable scent of old paper. Rows of tall bookshelves stretched into dimly lit corners. Most of these shelves now held revised editions of approved histories, but sometimes, deep in the storage rooms, older materials still remained. He wasn't supposed to access them. But he knew the librarians, and more importantly, he knew the building's forgotten pathways. He approached the main desk. Behind it sat Herr Vogt, an elderly librarian with silver-framed glasses and a perpetually disapproving expression. "You're early," Vogt muttered. "Work project," Lukas replied. It wasn't a lie. Not entirely. Vogt squinted at him as if trying to read his thoughts. For a moment, Lukas feared the librarian would ask more questions, but instead he simply waved one hand lazily. "The annex hall is cold today. Try not to freeze while you are chasing your ghosts." Lukas smiled thinly. "I'll try." He walked past the shelves, heading toward a narrow staircase leading down to the storage rooms. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, he found the old metal door with the faded sign, Archive Section C, Restricted. His heart beat faster. He glanced around, then used the small key he still carried, a relic from a temporary permit he had once been granted years ago, before the new regulations. Surprisingly, it still worked. The lock clicked. He slipped inside. The room beyond was dark until he flipped the switch. Rows of metal cabinets filled the space, and faint dust motes drifted through the thin beam of the ceiling light. This was where the university had stored materials deemed in need of revision. Most of it had been cleared out during the restructuring, but not all. He searched slowly, opening drawer after drawer. Reports, letters, newspaper fragments, academic notes, some approved, some marked for removal. Many files were incomplete, as if they had been selectively thinned. After 20 minutes, he found a drawer labelled 1939, 1941, Civil Administration Records. He opened it and froze. Inside were at least 30 folders, each filled with documents similar to the letter Anna had shown him. Some described relocations, others reported restrictions. Still others mentioned disputes between local administrators who sought clarity on policies that no longer existed in the official timeline. His pulse quickened. This wasn't just a few lost papers. This was an entire erased chapter of history. He lifted one folder carefully, and then he heard footsteps. Soft at first, getting closer. Lukas quickly closed the drawer, turned off the light, and hid behind a tall cabinet just as the metal door creaked open. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. "Anyone here?" a voice called out. Lukas held his breath. It was a security officer. He recognized the tone, the clipped manner of speech, the heavy boots. The officer stepped inside, the beams sweeping over the cabinets, the floor, the far wall. Lukas silently pressed his back against the cabinet. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure it could be heard. The officer muttered something about unauthorized access and walked deeper into the room. The light passed dangerously close. For a moment, Lukas thought it was over. Then the officer's radio crackled. Patrol needed upstairs. The flashlight paused, then turned away. The officer left the room, the heavy door closing behind him. Lukas exhaled shakily and leaned against the cabinet. He stayed completely still for a full minute. When he finally emerged, he didn't open the drawer again. Not today. It was too risky. Instead, he took only one thing, a small, thin notebook lying loose on a nearby shelf. It seemed forgotten, unmarked, handwritten, fragile. He slipped it into his coat. Then he switched off the light and left the archives quietly. Back in the freezing air of the street, Lukas walked quickly, his mind racing. A letter from Anna. An entire drawer of hidden documents. A mysterious notebook whose contents he hadn't yet dared to read. The truth wasn't just buried, it was carefully buried. As he crossed the river again, the city seemed different. Not peaceful, but watchful, as if Berlin itself had eyes. When he reached his apartment and finally opened the notebook, he found the first page filled with a single sentence, written in careful handwriting. "If you are reading this, it means the truth survived longer than I expected." Lukas stared at the words. Someone, maybe a historian, maybe an administrator, had tried to leave behind a record, a message. He turned the page. More writing, more details, more contradictions to the official story. He felt a chill run through him. Whatever this notebook contained, it was dangerous. And now he was holding it. The hidden network. The following evening, Berlin seemed unusually quiet. Snow had stopped falling, but the clouds hung low over the rooftops, trapping the streetlight glow beneath them. Lukas walked quickly, one hand pressed against the inside of his coat where the notebook rested. He'd spent the entire day reading it word by word, page by page. It was unlike anything he'd seen before. The author hadn't signed a name, but the handwriting suggested an educated person, likely someone working in an administrative office during the early years of the war. The notebook didn't describe battles or strategy. Instead, it detailed political debates, internal disagreements, and early policies that were later removed from public memory. Each page contradicted portions of the official narrative that citizens learned in school. But one part troubled Lukas most. Near the middle of the notebook, the author wrote, "There are others who keep the old records, documents hidden, protected. We call ourselves the Archivists." Lukas read that sentence again and again. Archivists. Were they still alive? Was there a hidden group of people trying to preserve the real history? If so, he needed to find them. And the notebook offered only one clue: a location. Cellar 12, Old Printworks District. A place he had never heard of. Now, as he walked through the darkened streets, Lukas felt both nervous and strangely hopeful. If the Archivists existed, Anna needed to know too. He had arranged to meet her near the old tram depot, far from the busy central lines. She was already waiting, wrapped tightly in her coat, her breath forming pale clouds in the air. "You said it was urgent," she whispered as soon as he approached. "What happened?" Lukas glanced around. No one nearby. "Anna, the notebook you gave me led to something else. A name, a group." She frowned. "What group?" He lowered his voice even further. "The Archivists." Anna's eyes widened with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "I've heard that name only once someone mentioned it at the school years ago, but very quietly, and I never learned what it meant." "It means there may be others like us," Lukas replied. "People who've been protecting the truth for years." Anna hesitated. "And you want to find them?" "I have to," he said, "before everything is erased completely." She nodded slowly. "Then I'm coming with you." "No," Lukas said immediately. "It's too risky." "Lukas," she said firmly, "you won't find anything without help. Besides, you already involved me the moment you took that letter." He wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. And in truth, he didn't want to face this alone. They walked together toward the old Printworks district. The buildings there were older, darker, and far from the monitored city centre. Many workshops had been abandoned years earlier, left in half-frozen silence. They found cellar 12 behind a long brick structure with boarded-up windows. A rusted metal door marked with the faded number 12 sat at the bottom of a short stairwell. Lukas paused. Anna looked at him. "Ready," she whispered. "No," he admitted, "but let's go anyway." They descended the steps. Lukas pushed on the door. It creaked loudly but opened. Inside, the cellar was lit by a single dim lamp. The air smelled of old ink and damp paper. Rows of crates lined the walls. At the far end stood a wooden table with a small lantern, and behind it, an elderly woman with grey hair pulled into a bun. She wore simple clothes and round spectacles, and her posture was straight, almost formal. Her voice was calm when she spoke. "You shouldn't be here." Lukas froze. Anna swallowed hard. We came because we read a notebook. It mentioned the Archivists." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Show it." With trembling hands, Lukas pulled the notebook from his coat and placed it on the table. The woman examined it briefly, then looked up. "Where did you get this?" "A university archive drawer," Lukas said. "It was left behind, forgotten." The woman's expression softened just a little. "Forgotten," she repeated quietly. "Nothing is forgotten, only waiting to be found." Then she sighed. "I suppose there is no point asking you to leave now. Sit." They obeyed. "My name," she said, "is Frau Reinhardt. I was once a historian like you. When the new directives came, many of us refused to destroy our research, so we hid it. We hid everything we could." She gestured around the room. "These crates contain documents from towns, universities, councils, all the pieces of the old history. We preserve them because truth must exist somewhere, even if it cannot be spoken aloud." Anna leaned forward. "Why not share it? Why keep it hidden?" Frau Reinhardt shook her head gently. "Because people are afraid to know, afraid to ask, and afraid to challenge anything written in official textbooks. But someday, someone brave enough might come, someone who understands the weight of history." She looked at Lukas with sharp, searching eyes. "And perhaps that someone is you." Lukas felt a chill run down his spine. "I don't know if I'm brave," he whispered. "You came here," she replied. "That is enough for now." She opened one of the crates and pulled out a folder. Inside were reports similar to the documents Lukas had seen: relocations, administrative debates, suppressed disagreements within the early government. Lukas stared at them. "This is everything the Bureau wants erased." "Yes," Frau Reinhardt said. "And if they find us, this room will disappear forever. So will we." Anna looked uneasy. "What do you want us to do?" Frau Reinhardt closed the folder with a soft thud. "Learn," she said. "Understand the truth. Then decide how much you're willing to risk." Before Lukas could respond, footsteps echoed from above, faint but unmistakable. Anna's face paled. "Someone's outside." Frau Reinhardt extinguished the lantern instantly and whispered, "Stay silent." The cellar plunged into darkness. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then the footsteps faded away. Frau Reinhardt relit the lantern. "You must go," she said urgently. "Come back tomorrow night, alone if possible." But when Lukas looked at Anna, he knew neither of them would abandon this path now. They left the cellar quietly, hearts racing, carrying with them a truth too heavy for one night. As they stepped back into the cold Berlin air, Lukas realized something. This was no longer about a forgotten letter or a hidden notebook. It was about a buried history, one that demanded to be remembered. And now, like it or not, he and Anna were part of it.